I don't just talk about other people's stuff, I also make my own. Books in particular. To date, I have 4 books you can check out on Amazon. Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, Occult Mafia, Emerald of Maddox City, and the short story collection Assorted Absurdities, Tales of Kaiju Punk and Other Genres. Hop on down to the description for Amazon links to all 4 books. Enjoy whichever ones you read, and enjoy the video.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni Viewer, and I'm back. I've got my new camera all set up. I'm sure I still need to make some adjustments in a few areas, but enough about that. There's a new episode of Primal we have to talk about. The episode entitled The Colossus, which I kind of have mixed feelings about this one. So it picks up by catching up with a Viking chieftain, and it turns out I was kinda right about him. He is technically dead, but we are still going to see more of him anyway. The big revelation that comes with this particular thing, though, is that heaven and hell are confirmed to exist in this particular universe. I mean, whether or not they are heaven and hell as you or I picture them, who knows? But clearly there is a good place you can go that's in the sky, and there's a bad place you can go that's underground. The Viking chieftain, too bad for him, gets dragged down to the bad place. And there's where he meets the giant shadow demon, or I guess we can just go ahead and call him the devil now. And it looks like the devil doesn't just want to cast him into the lake of fire and be done with it. He wants the chieftain to go back specifically to get Spear and Fang. An interesting thing that he would have a specific vendetta against them. Although, I will say, that reminded me of Looney Tunes. You may find that kind of weird, but it was in one of the movies, I believe, one of the anthology movies, where Yosemite Sam dies and goes to hell, and the devil keeps sending him back because the soul the devil really wants to claim is Bugs Bunny, because he's always managed to outwit and cheat death. So, whether or not that was a direct influence, I have no idea. But either way, it's kind of the same setup. And in order to achieve that goal, the devil turns the chieftain into some sort of giant muscle-bound monstrosity. But then we pick up where Spear and Fang and Mira are still hanging out. And this is where I kind of feel the episode actually took a bit of a misstep. Which missteps in Primal are incredibly rare, so when they happen, they really stick out. The misstep is that for the first time in the series, the conflict could have been 100% avoided if the characters hadn't made a rather dumb decision. So, as you know, last episode, Fang built her nest, laid 3 eggs, and she is not going to leave that nest for anything. And, she picked a good place to build it, apparently, because it seems like a relatively peaceful region. Apparently, those giant buzzards don't do anything unless Vikings rope them into it, so nothing's trying to kill them. They can have a moment of peace, yet when we see Spear and Mira, they look bored out of their minds. Somehow staying in that one place is wrong to them. They don't want to stay in one spot, they want to keep going. So they start trying to figure out a way to get the eggs onto the boat, because that's the only way they can get Fang onto the boat. They don't want to leave her behind. And I will say that particular part was very amusing, watching them constantly trying to get around Fang and Fang constantly stopping them until they finally do manage to succeed and convey what's going on. It was well played, but the thing is, if they hadn't gotten on the boat, if they just stayed there, the rest of the episode would not have happened. I mean, Maybe you could say that the new villains for this particular episode could have shown up there anyway, but you can't necessarily guarantee that, because from the looks of it, these are villains who go out actively seeking places where there would be conflict, and they'd have no reason to go to that particular area. So, yeah, that's why I think this episode actually took a misstep. It felt kind of contrived in a way. Like, they clearly wrote the characters into an area where there's no conflict, but Primal is all about conflict. So how do you bring conflict into it? Well, apparently they couldn't think of a way, so instead they had to just have the characters leave. And I don't really think they had much of a reason to leave. Like, you'll watch the rest of the show, Spear and Fang have never gone looking for trouble, but trouble always seems to find them because the entire world of Primal is trouble. It's unavoidable, really. But they don't go out actively seeking conflict or actively putting themselves into regions where there would be conflict. And they certainly don't do so because they're stupid. So, yeah, I just have a hard time buying into that one. That they would willingly leave a place that is safe to take a chance out in a world that they know for a fact is out to kill them at this point. Although, even then, I will say, we do get a really nice ominous shot right before the ad break where, Fang wakes up in the middle of the night, scratches herself on the mast of the ship, and in the background, just in the mist, you can see the silhouette of this massive, unnatural structure. And Fang doesn't notice it, but we do. It is a good shot. It really sets up an ominous tone that will keep you sticking around for after the ad break. But still, the way they got there, it could have been better. After the ad break, though, when the conflict actually heats up, it's back to business as usual. And this time it appears our villains are Egyptian of some sort. Not necessarily true Egyptian, like clearly some liberties were taken, but the massive city barge has an Eye of Ra painted on it. They have the columns and everything inside, so Egyptian is clearly the primary influence. And I gotta say, the whole city barge thing, that's a neat idea. I have seen stuff like that done before, but seeing it through the Primal lens, it was a nice addition here. But of course, with the conflict that happens, we meet the Colossus, the title antagonist, if you will. This giant hulk of a man, as big as Fang, who just cannot seem to take any permanent damage. They keep fighting him. Nothing seems to affect him for very long. And at first, it seems like you're meant to think, oh, so this is the Viking chieftain come back. Because, the last time we saw him, he was turned into a big muscle-bound humanoid. Here's a big muscle-bound humanoid. And there's even one shot where his eyes kind of have that black with yellow pupils look to them. So you're thinking, okay, so clearly this is the chieftain. But apparently he's not, though we'll come back to that. Now, of course, then tragedy strikes because Fang tries protecting her eggs by scooping them up into her mouth. And she loses one of them. I had a feeling those eggs weren't completely safe. Two of them do manage to survive. Like, the way it plays out is a slow motion roller coaster. She gets hit and everything slows down. You see the eggs fly out and you're like, no, no, no! Then you see them land safely in the nest. Oh, phew. One keeps going. Oh, crud. And it cracks against the wall and... I mean, even though I was kind of bracing myself for something to happen to at least one of those eggs, that doesn't make seeing it happen any easier. It's still really devastating. And then the queen enters and uses those 2 surviving eggs to basically get the trio to surrender, and they're in chains again. And that's when we learn the Colossus is also a prisoner. He's not working willingly with these pseudo-Egyptians. He's basically just forced to. What they've got over him, who knows? Probably family? I really don't know. But Spear and Fang quickly find themselves in a similar situation where, they are the top fighters at this point. They stood their own against the Colossus, so the queen figures next place we're going may as well put them on the same side. And this is a pretty classic pulp story. You find it in Conan stories, you find it in any sort of pulp fantasy or pulp adventure where a character finds himself, the hero, I should say, finds himself enslaved by a villainous group and is basically forced to fight for them for at least a brief period of time. And the next stop is, Assyria, Mesopotamia. It doesn't matter. It's all a grab bag at this point. I don't know if Primal actually does have an explanation for how all these different cultures can coexist, and maybe it doesn't even need one. Post-apocalyptic, prehistoric, who cares? They're just throwing everything in at this point. And the episode continues as Spear and Fang enter this conflict and actually, once again, prove the primal theory that even amongst all these soldiers in full armor with advanced weaponry, advanced compared to the 2 of them, and walled cities and everything, they still are the top dogs because they don't have any encumbrance, I guess you could say. Spear is able to scale a wall just by climbing up it. Fang is able to take charge of the battering ram and break down the gate in one hit. And, it's no surprise at this point, but it's kind of interesting how quickly they fall into the idea of just continuing to fight. But again, to them, it's all just about survival. I don't necessarily think they are really considering the moral implications of what they're doing here. They are just fighting because they're trying to survive and they're trying to protect those eggs and Mira. But then that leads to something else that's kind of weird about this episode. It doesn't really have an ending. We can basically assume that now that the city has been breached and that Spear and Fang are continuing to just slaughter every soldier they see, that this place is going to fall to those wandering ocean-bound Egyptians. But there's no real conclusion to it. If it ends mid-battle, which that's not the first time Primal has done that. The 6th episode where Fang is recovering after getting the tar beaten out of her by the ape men, that also ended mid-conflict with the 2 of them fighting off the hordes of jackals and ending by just roaring at the sky. But there it felt different. There it was like, okay, they are back. They are back to full health. We know how this is going to go. They're just fighting off a bunch of wild animals. They got this. This episode felt like it needed more of a conclusion because we don't really know why this city is being attacked. We don't really know much about our new antagonists, other than they are apparently wandering warlords who attack just for the heck of it. I don't know, it felt like this episode ended early, and I realize this season is not as episodic as season 1. They are telling a longer form story, so obviously episodes are going to go and flow into each other. but it still felt like this episode just kind of stopped suddenly. So, I don't necessarily think this is one of the better episodes. Like, I know a lot of people really didn't like the Primal Theory because it was such a departure from everything else, but the Primal Theory on its own still was a really well done, self-contained episode. This, I feel like it has a few hiccups. It's still not a bad episode per se. I wouldn't call it bad. But as Primal episodes go, it could have been better. And then, of course, we learn for certain with the episode preview that the Colossus is not the revived Viking Chief, because apparently the revived Viking Chief is going to dig his way out of hell in the next episode. But that can wait for next week. Bottom line, the Colossus episode was a bit of a step down, but I'm sure the show can pull itself back up. So, we'll see what happens next time. Anyway, here's hoping this particular video turns out at least watchable. Again, working with new technology, but adjustments will be made as I go forward. Until such time as we meet again, this is the OmniViewer signing off.
Congratulations, you reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, you might want to consider supporting us on Patreon. Of course, the other way to support us is to go to Amazon and check out our books, Operation Red Dragon, The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, The Occult Mafia, Emerald of Maddox City, and Assorted Absurdities, Tales of Kaiju Punk and Other Genres. Also check the description for links to DeviantArt and other platforms we operate. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.